Hello, and welcome to another episode of I Demand a Homestead. My name is Amanda, and today what we're going to be doing is we are going to be talking about how to turn beautiful honey into gorgeous mead. Okay, so mead is actually one of the original alcohols that was ever made. It was a very kind of favorite drink of the Vikings, and they used lots of different flavors. So today we're going to be doing something similar. We're using our wax cappings and leftover beeswax from our Warre hive.
I want mead!
If you want to see that video, please feel free to check it out. I'll post a link up there. All right, so what we're going to do now is we're very shortly going to get started. Oh!
Mead!
Sorry, we haven't started making it yet.
Oh.
All right. I guess we'll get started.
Mead. Mead. Mead.
So this is the leftover beeswax and cappings that I have from extracting honey from a couple of hives. So this still has some honey left in it that you just are never going to be able to get out, okay? Because in a Warre hive, if you have checked out any of those videos on Warre hives, you know that they're just top bars, and so they're not frames. So when you extract the honey, you can't reuse the wax. Okay, so this is how it kind of looks after you've extracted the honey. So what I've got this in right now, because I've got so much, is I've got it in a big 23-liter or 5-gallon fermenter bucket. And this is all sterilized, by the way, that's important, sterilized with potassium metabisulfite. The honeycomb and wax and honey is obviously not sterile, but those are kind of natural products, so I don't really worry about that too much. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to fill it up probably just above the level of the wax there with warm water. So you could use bottled water for this. But so that way you know it's sterile. But we're on a well and our water goes through a UV filter, so I know that this is kind of free of bacteria and other contaminants. So that's what I'm going to use. Okay, let's come back when we've got it above the level of the wax. Okay, so now we have got this up to almost the top with water here, and then I'm just going to push it all down in and give it a really good stir, okay? Because a lot of that honey is still trapped in the cells of the comb. So I want to kind of make sure that I'm going to extract as much of it as possible. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to leave this for about 24 hours to allow that honey to come out and dissolve into the water. I'm going to make sure it's covered though. And I don't want to leave it longer than 24 hours, or actually this will start to ferment on its own. And I want to control that a little bit myself of what kind of yeast I'm going to use. So I'm going to stir it every so often and keep it covered, as I said, to make sure that no wild yeast, extra wild yeast get in there. And then we will come back. Okay, so we are now 24 hours out from this soaking in the water. And if I kind of, it's hard to get a little bit without all the wax in it, but you can kind of see the color is kind of nice, kind of honey yellow color. We'll obviously filter out all those wax particles eventually, but that is going to have definitely a certain amount of honey in it. So what we're going to do now is we're going to scoop it into another big fermenter bucket through a cheesecloth just to try and filter out as many of the particles as possible. And then after that, we're going to try and see how much sugar is in the water and how much water, like how much honey water we actually have. I'm going to scoop it and into once we get a certain amount in here, I'm going to fold this up. Okay, like so. And give it a little squeeze. Try and get the rest of that water out. And then I'm just going to keep repeating this process over and over again until we're all done. All right, so here is our honey water that we have filtered out. And because this is comb that has been used to kind of raise brood as well as to store honey, it's got this darker color, and probably will also have a more kind of strong quote unquote hive flavor. So I'm actually going to probably use this to make a spiced mead because I think that's going to work the best. So, and then you can see over here in this bag, I've got my unprocessed wax, which I will then use to make beeswax, as we said before. Okay. I've got my thermometer in here so I can kind of monitor the temperature of this to make sure that it's the right temperature during the fermentation and also when I'm putting in the yeast. All right, and I've got my hydrometer here to measure the potential alcohol. And right now it's measuring, and I'll show you this in a minute, probably around 7.5% alcohol. Okay, which is not bad. I want it to be a little stronger than that. So I'm gonna probably put in another 3 pounds of honey. All right, so I've added my additional 3 pounds of honey. And we'll just check and see where our hydrometer is here. Come in here, and you can kind of see the line that says 10%, 5%. It looks like it's sitting at 6, 7, 8, 9. We're pretty close to 10%. Pretty close. Okay. So what I'm going to do now is I'm actually going to add some orange slices in here, about 5 oranges worth. So 1 orange per gallon of mead that you're making. And that's going to add a little bit to the sugar as well. So that's probably going to get us up to our 10%, which is fine with me. Okay, there are our oranges. And I'm going to give that a little stir. I didn't squeeze them. You could do that, but the juice will get extracted during the fermentation process. So what I'm planning on doing, again, as I said, I'm making a spiced mead. So traditionally you'd add cinnamon, you'd add cloves, potentially nutmeg and allspice. But during the fermentation, those kind of flavors get a little bit altered by the fermentation process itself. So what I'm planning on doing is I'm going to put like a cinnamon stick and cloves in there and everything after the fermentation is done. So after probably about 2 weeks, 2 or 3 weeks, depending on how long the fermentation is taking. And while it's clearing and aging, that's when I'm going to have a spice bag in there, okay? So that way I'll get kind of a more pure flavor of those spices. I'm going to leave these oranges in here only for probably a week because otherwise the pith, that kind of rind part, can lead to like a bitter flavor in there, and I don't want that. All right, so now what we're going to do is we're going to pitch in our yeast, and then we're going to cover it up someplace warm, and we'll come back in a couple of days and see how it's fermenting. Okay, so I've got just a standard kind of yeast package here, one that you would kind of, this is one of the more versatile ones, K1V1116, okay? And then I'm just going to, again, because one package is pretty much good for a 5-gallon batch, I'm going to use the whole package. And I'm just going to sprinkle it on the top here. You could also put in a little bit of yeast nutrient if you wanted, which I probably will once the fermentation gets going. Probably about a teaspoon's worth. And then I'm going to stir this really lightly, just to kind of get it moistened. You don't want to stir it too much because that yeast needs oxygen. And I don't want to push it down too deep down into the liquid because then it won't have oxygen. Okay, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to come back tomorrow and give it a stir. I'm going to give it a stir every day for the first 7 days, and then I'm going to take the oranges out, and then I'll let the fermentation kind of finish, and then all the kind of dead yeast and particles will sink to the bottom. And then what we'll do is we'll rack it off. We'll siphon it off. Okay, so now it is 24 hours later and we're gonna check on our mead and see how well it's fermenting. All right, let's take the lid off here. Whoa, it's really big and bubbly. It looks great. Let's have a look.
Mead?
No, sorry, babe. It's not ready yet. Okay, so here is a closer look at what's going on here, and you can kind of see we got nice bubbles forming. All right, it's going to probably get going a lot more than this, but this is a good start. We can definitely see that the yeast is active. You can actually hear it fizzing. So we give it that nice stir just to kind of get oxygen in there. And so then what I'm going to do is I'm just going to come in and stir it every day, once a day. And I'm going to take those oranges out at 1 week. And then we will come back once it's done its fermentation, and then I'll show you how we rack it into another container. So thank you for joining me in another episode of I Demand a Homestead. If you like this video, please feel free to press the subscribe button as well as the notification bell so that way you will never miss another one of my videos or my husband's crazy antics pretending to be a Viking. All right, so everyone have a great day. We'll see you again in a few, 2 or 3 weeks when this is all finished. All right, take care. Bye-bye.